You're listening to a CNA podcast.
Hello, everyone. It's Andrea Heng. You are listening to the Money Talks podcast, and this is where we discuss all things money. Now, if you haven't already, please follow us on Spotify. We're also on Apple Podcasts and YouTube Music, because that way you'll be the first to know when a new episode of Money Talks drops, okay? All right, so Junaini, my producer, is in the studio with me, and she is about to hit me with some news headlines. Junaini, hit it.
When I say Bukit Timah, what comes to mind?
Oh, okay, Botanic Gardens, that's one. But also more significantly, those good schools, big bungalows, basically everything that's out of my price range. Certainly an elite part of Singapore. Let's not lie to ourselves.
Yes. Okay. So Bukit Timah is going to go through some changes. Not now, but in about 20 years from now.
Okay.
MND has announced that 15 to 20,000 public and private homes are being planned at the future Turf City housing estate. This is the first time in about 40 years that there's going to be public housing in Bukit Timah. So for the flats, experts are saying that they're likely to be under the prime location public housing model and make up no more than 40% of the new homes.
Okay, no surprises there, obviously, because it's a prime location. So let's talk numbers. How much would these cost?
Obviously, it is hard to pinpoint now, but according to experts quoted by CNA, 4-room flats are likely to be about 600,000 Sing dollars.
Can't wait to see how it's all going to shape up. What's next?
Okay, in keeping with the homes theme,
Right.
HDB has announced a new type of flats will be piloted in the upcoming Kallang Wampo BTO project, and they are calling these white flats.
Okay, what exactly are white flats?
When you're invited to pick your flat, you can choose a white flat, which won't come with partitions or beams. So basically, it's an open concept flat. One big space for the living room and the bedroom.
Right.
Do you think this is a good idea?
I think it is, because there tends to be this pattern of especially younger folks where they want these open, expansive spaces in an HDB flat. And I think this way they immediately get to see what it looks like. But the thing is, it's about having options also, right? So what if you want the beam back at that space?
Exactly. So Minister Desmond Lee has said that this will cater to young people who want more flexibility in the way they renovate their homes. But of course, it remains to be seen what the price difference will be between the white flats and their traditional counterparts.
So, if you've been following me on Instagram and TikTok, then you would know about a new feature of the Money Talks podcast, and that's the Money Talks Challenge. So, for the first Money Talks Challenge ever, my producer Junaini challenged me to take public transport throughout the month. Here's a disclaimer. I only need to think about the ride home, because my ride to work in the early morning, because I host the morning show on radio, that's covered by the company. So just to give you an idea, a cab ride home from work for me is roughly $20. And if I have errands to run, which is mostly in town, a ride home is about $17 to $18. But that fee, it buys me time, and that's priceless, because that journey takes me just 20 minutes. So in contrast, the average fare home via train and bus, because that's just what my journey home entails, is a nifty $2 to $3. But then, while it saves me money, it's also a 1 hour 45-minute journey home, almost 2 hours. That's a long time spent, and it's time I can't get back. So while this has been a wallet-friendly experiment, it's also taught me things that have absolutely nothing to do with money. Proper planning, multitasking on the go, even taking the chance to slow down and refresh my mind with a podcast, or even catching up on articles for work. Well, the conclusion now is, do the intangible benefits outweigh the benefits I see in my bank account? Not always, but I believe they are worth counting anyway. Because let's face it, carrying 3 heavy bags of groceries after work on a long train and bus journey is just not the most efficient nor comfortable, is it? So that's it, the very first Money Talks Challenge. Let me know what you think. If you want to find me on social media, I'm on Instagram and TikTok, andreaheng.cna. Welcome back to the Money Talks podcast. I'm Andrea Heng. Now, for some people, the 9-to-5 job just doesn't cut it, right? Getting dressed, jostling with crowds, endless meetings that could have been emails. You know what I mean, right? So freelancing can be an empowering option because it lets you choose what you want to do and how much you want to do. Plus, you can work anytime, anywhere, and wear anything you want. In fact, MOM data shows that over 221,000 residents engaged in own account work as a regular form of employment as at mid-2023. But, as Eleanor Roosevelt once said, with freedom comes responsibility. That's right. The trade-off for that flexibility is discipline. Discipline in the work, but also in your finances, because no one else is going to be doing it for you. You'll also be missing various safety nets, right? Like insurance and healthcare. And here in Singapore, regular CPF contribution. So is there a way for freelancers to be financially secure, not just for the now, but also while building a financially sound future? One of those ways is to get advice from Ting. She is the CEO of MoneyOwl. Welcome to Money Talks, Ting.
Thank you, Andrea. So happy to be here.
So there seems to be this common perception that people without a salary have a more precarious financial situation. Is that really true, though?
Well, Andrea, like you say, with freedom comes responsibility. And if you look at the MOM survey, the one that you talked about, actually it seems that over 90% have said that they choose this. They choose to be freelancers because of flexibility and all that. It's just that you do not have these structures that are quote unquote imposed on you. You come to work, you get your salary in your bank account every month, and you have the CPF, and there are already basic structures that are there. So in Singapore, for freelancers, there are some basics or mandatory things that make you do the right thing that's good for you. For example, the MediSave contribution.
Yeah.
But you need to build the rest yourself. So it is not necessarily that you can't have those structures to support your financial resilience and adequacy. You just have to be more aware and know how to go about doing it. Yeah.
So are there common financial issues that freelancers actually run into? What do freelancers tend to get wrong when it comes to planning their finances?
I think the first thing is that they don't plan. Right, so I'm not sure if it's fair to make this extrapolation, but perhaps people who like freedom and I want to do things my way and all that, kind of more creative people, maybe not so structured. So it's not criticism, perhaps, because I'm not naturally very structured myself, and that's why, maybe by some irony of destiny, I had to do this financial planning thing. And I tell people all the time, build your systems, build your habits and all that, because I know it really helps us. So the first mistake is really not planning, right? The second one, I think, is really just ignoring reality. Right? Like trying to, I'm going to get that big break, and it's all dependent on something you can't control.
Yes.
Yeah, and you can ignore reality, but you can't ignore the consequences of reality.
Oh, for sure. You got to be prepared to answer to those too, yeah?
That's right. Yeah, so you need to face the facts, right? Face the facts and then do something according to what you can control. Because hope is not a strategy, yeah? Hope is not a strategy, right? And daydreaming is not a strategy.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean that you can't pursue your dreams. It doesn't mean any of that. You just have to really get started and at least get a basic frame in mind.
Yeah, I think that's really good advice. And I think more importantly, it acknowledges the need for certain people to have no structure. You still need to have some kind of basic rundown of what you need to do, especially financially.
That's right. Yeah.
And especially in Singapore. Okay, assuming we've decided to go freelance, secured maybe 2 or 3 gigs, what do we need to set up in terms of accounts, for example?
Okay, I think perhaps let me suggest a way of thinking about your income.
Sure.
Right? Because if you go back to that 2023 MOM survey, it said what are the main concerns that people have, or the main challenges of these own account workers? And over about 20% say it's really uncertainty of finding sufficient work and the lack of sufficient work in general, and then their healthcare, their retirement, and all these concerns, right? So one is really about income, and the other one is about expenses and long-term expenses. So I think one way of thinking about it is this: your income is very lumpy.
Yep.
Right? So sometimes you have, sometimes you don't
Correct.
have and all that. But let's say you're already a freelancer, you need to find what is the equivalent that you are actually earning in a year.
Okay.
Let's say you say that, okay, I'm actually bringing in, let's say, 50,000 a year, right? This is not the same as 50,000 of a full-time employee.
Right.
You know why? Because no CPF. There's
Correct.
another 17% or so for most people from the employer. Then there's, of course, then the interest on that CPF.
Yeah.
Right? Then that's on retirement side. Insurance.
Yes.
There's at least basic like workman's injury compensation. You
Correct.
don't have. Sick leave. You don't have, right?
Yeah.
So you easily need to like almost like discount what you have by, let's say, 20%, right? And then think about it this way. So let's say you're talking about, let's say, 50,000 a year. What you're talking about is every month you are actually earning about $4,000 a month, okay? And some months you will get 1,000, some months you will get 30,000. Okay, so how do you think about it?
Yeah.
So think about it as you are generally earning about 4,000 a month, and then set up a system for yourself to make sure that your expenses are within a certain amount, make sure that your savings are within a certain amount. So what is the first thing you do? So 4,000 a year, you should be saving at least, I think for freelancers, 15 to 20%. Right? So set it up. Set up a standing instruction.
Okay.
Yeah. So you have one account in which you get all your money.
Yes.
Right. Then you set up another account in which you save all this money.
Right.
Right. And
It's called the do not touch
it is,
account.
it's the saving or investment account.
Right.
And then you automate it. Right. You automate it so that you pay yourself first. So the first thing that comes in, you do that. Now, but it's a bit hard if really you have zero balance, right? Then it comes down. So ideally, before you even start, you should already have a certain level, and then you do this. But if not, then what you need to do is that you say, okay, I will save towards something, and let me call this the so-called emergency fund.
Yes.
You know, a lot of people don't understand what emergency fund is. They think it's really for emergencies, but actually it is for the emergency of lacking income.
Yeah,
Okay?
exactly. Yeah.
So now that we're facing more retrenchments, people understand this is actually tied you over time so you don't have income.
Yeah.
So set that one up first and then accumulate in that account until you have a certain amount. Okay? So what is this amount?
Yes.
For most employees, people say 6 months, 3 to 6 months.
Yeah.
And freelancers, I would just say 12 months. Okay, so fill up this bucket
Yeah.
of your emergency fund in savings and always top it back up. So that's the first thing that you need to do. And I think if as a freelancer you can already do that, you are already in a very good space. Then we can talk about investments later, right? And then if you want to, you can also take out all your other like fixed expenses that you already have, and you can actually gyro it from a different account if you want. So you can have 3 accounts,
Okay.
right? So that only one is left to spend on.
Right,
Yeah, it's
right.
possible, but I think at a minimum, the first thing that you should have is actually this savings account,
Right.
because not many people can handle 3 accounts. So at least 2 lah, at least 2 in my opinion, at least 2.
Yeah. Okay, so what about setting up an account for business? Is that something that's worth thinking about, or do you think that's just too many components to consider?
No, I think it's good because it gives you the discipline to say actually how much are you spending on your business,
Yeah.
right? So you can actually replicate this thing of like even when you're self-employed, you're paying yourself, right? So this is actually your salary. Like I said, $4,000, right? This is your salary, and then
Yes.
out of that you pay yourself first into your savings. In fact, one of the things that I think freelancers after a while you can consider is actually to incorporate in the business, right? Because when you incorporate business, there are certain advantages.
Yes.
Most freelancers that I talk to who don't do this, don't do it for no other reason than a bit lazy to go and find out, and it's a bit leceh. But there are, of course, if you are in fact a little bit more enterprising, there are also all these startup grants, and the government gives quite a bit to
Correct.
Enterprise Singapore, and you can really go and look
All you
those
need to
up.
do is register your business, really.
That's right, register it, and then you start to get grants. And if you're really a company, like a private limited company, you can also have certain SME financing and all that. And you make what you bring to the world actually replicable and sustainable as an exitable business, right? But of course, that's not for everyone, right?
Sure.
Also, but it's something to consider, at least to look into.
Right.
I would say when you're at the stage when you're about to pay income tax, that means that you probably might earn
Yeah.
enough. But do look into it because there's quite a lot of support on that part.
Yeah, exactly. And it's something that individual freelancers don't really think about, or it doesn't really come to their minds. It's not top of their mind because they think of themselves as individual workers, not necessarily a business. Ultimately, you are a business because you're offering a set of services, right? Even though you're just one person. So I wanted to talk about what you mentioned earlier a couple of times, the salary.
That's right.
Right? And I know it's important to pay myself, but how do I define this, especially when, as we said, some days we're earning $1,000, some months we're earning $30,000. And yes, while we should be planning with the year's salary in mind, how do we actually pay ourselves monthly then as a salary when that income generated is inconsistent? How do we tackle this?
Okay, I think that the main reality you need to face is that how good are you as a freelancer, such that, and how much income can you actually generate? And it's actually a mindset that is not to do with the income side, but to do with the expense side. If you spend, say, 25,000 a year,
Sure.
okay, on your basic expenses, you should be able to generate income of 50,000 right, before you even go there. I'm not even talking about CPF and everything right now.
Yeah.
Okay, so basically, if you can't achieve that, you're going to be very stressed. So when I say think about your salary, let's say 4,000, I'm not saying that how you cash flow wise manage to extract this and you can keep it aside.
Right.
Because your bank account is going to look very weird. It's going to be like, it's going to be, let's say you earn 30,000, then after that it's going to minus, then after this go back up, right? Yeah. So that is the minus part you need to know, right? So that means that if you really think that in 1 year you're going to earn 50,000, and you should have a good sense right, of that, then you should not be spending more than, let's say, 2,000
Right.
a month, right?
Right.
And if you can't do that, then perhaps you should delay your entry into this space.
Right. Yeah. Something also to think about, right? Freelancers actually can lose work at any given time.
That's right.
Projects can end abruptly, and in an instant, one source of income is gone. How do we manage our finances at the current going when this happens, when this abrupt end happens, and obviously my projection is gone now, right?
Right,
So
yeah.
what do I do?
Yeah, so that's what the emergency fund we talked about is there. So so unlike others, this emergency fund might actually be drawn down on a little bit more.
Right.
So, or you can get sick, right? And then you suddenly cannot work. But you need to
Precisely.
eat, right?
Yeah.
So that's why I say 12 months. Because for employees, we might say 6 months or even 3 months, right? But it's the in-between. Living with the uncertainty is part of being a freelancer. But at least you're having that buffer. You know that you're okay. You know that you're okay for, on paper, it's 12 months.
Yep.
But in reality, it's more like 6 months.
Yeah.
Right? But you need to understand that this is why you're doing it.
Yeah.
Right? It's not that you can don't work for 12 months, right?
Yeah.
You need to understand that you're talking really that 12 months for others is effectively a kind of 3 to 6 months buffer for you.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah.
And it's from that mindset. I think that it's really about entering into freelancing. You need to know when the right time to enter.
So slow months can really be quite painful for freelancers. I mean, it really was painful for me. And it will be tempting at this point to lean on credit.
Yes.
How can we prevent our credit or debt from spiraling out of control when we are freelancing and when we get the slow months?
Like I was saying, that we have to build this buffer, right? So even if it's hard, that during your good months, then build even more of it. I was saying that you treat yourself as always saving that, let's say 20%
Yeah.
a month. But let's say you have a good month and you're not bringing just 4,000, right? You're bringing in 20,000,
Yeah.
right? And you know that you also got target annual income is 50,000. Then instead of using that money, go and big party and all that, right? Put 10,000 away.
Yeah.
And lock it
Lock
away.
it up.
Lock it up.
Yeah.
Right. Lock it
yeah.
up.
Okay. So one of the advantages of being a salaried employee is CPF contributions, and also income tax filings, insurance is done automatically as well. CPF especially, it's a big plank of retirement adequacy, right?
That's right.
So what do freelancers need to be conscious about here? I know you mentioned that the MediSave top-up contribution, or rather the MediSave contribution monthly, needs to be there as a freelancer. But what else do we need to be aware of?
Yeah. So that's by law, right? MediSave and all that. Of course.
And many people don't know that, by the way. A lot of
they don't?
freelancers actually don't know.
Oh.
I didn't know, actually, at the time that I was supposed to contribute to my MediSave even if I couldn't afford contributions to my OA.
Yeah.
Yeah, so actually a lot of freelancer friends of mine didn't know this and they got penalized as a result. So please take this as a PSA. If you are a freelancer, you need to at least contribute to your MediSave. But yes, what else should we be aware of?
For CPF, it's really for the long term, and it's really for your retirement, right? And if you look at what the employees actually contribute to their CPF, I think that's a good starting point.
Yeah.
So I think when you start, and I'm talking about special accounts, because special account is really the retirement.
Yes.
And I think the younger folks will start at 6% of their salary, right? And then it goes up 7 and 8.
Yeah.
So can you contribute at least that, right? As if you were an employee. And remember, I said that, okay, you're 50,000, right? Then you can go and top up, right? I think in the case of special, don't do it all at one go.
Yeah.
Right? You should save all at one go, that 10,000, but at least take that step of saying that, okay, I'm not worse off than if I were an employee because I've taken this step myself.
Yeah.
And I've seen people who have done that because they appreciate that 4% will compound, and it's a really big difference. Yeah. And don't say to yourself that I'm only going to start later when I am at a certain stage, because time is your friend. Right? And you just delay 10 years and you're going to have to save double
it's going to be
the
gone
amount.
in a blink of an eye, and you'll have not much to begin with.
That's right, yeah. And as especially a freelancer, you're dependent on your own labor, your own health, your own, so unless you build an exitable business, you are dependent on yourself.
Yeah.
And one day you will no longer be able to earn, and you will still have to spend, and that is the reality.
This is why they say health really is wealth.
That's
Because
right.
without health, you can't work.
But you can't control some things, right?
Yeah, you can't control some
yeah.
things. Yeah, correct. I wanted to go back to insurance a
Yes,
little bit,
insurance,
Ting.
yeah.
When I was freelancing for something like over a decade, my insurance agent or my financial planner at the time said, okay, now that you're freelancing, I think you should consider the different kind of plan. So for example, a plan with stronger income protection, because if anything were to happen to you physically and you won't be able to earn the same that you're earning now, that income protection will be in place to make sure that you're covered. So is that something that we should be thinking about as well, the type of insurance plans that we should be looking at?
Okay, yeah, I know where that's coming from, right? So there are, roughly speaking, two types of risks that you need to guard against, right?
Sure.
One is the big bills, and those are almost always medical bills, right? So if you kena hospital and all that, right? So the good thing is that we all have MediShield Life, right? We do recommend that you take an integrated shield plan because there are limits to MediShield Life, and this integrated shield plan is not expensive.
Yep.
We're talking about a few $100s from your MediSave. Don't do the private one, or whatever, but at least do the B1 plan, right?
Correct.
And the main thing you're ensuring there is your insurability, right? Because if you start too late, by the time you want to do something, you can't. So this is one type of insurance, right?
Okay.
Then the other type is actually income protection,
Correct.
loss of income.
Yes,
right?
that's one.
Yeah.
That's
so
the one.
there are actually three types of things that can cause you to lose your income, or three types of risks which you can't control. One is death.
Yeah.
Obviously, this only matters to you if you have dependents, right? And under the CPF scheme, as long as you have some money in the OA for them to deduct to premiums for, the dependents protection scheme gives you 70,000 sum assured coverage. But it's not for you, it's for your dependents.
Yes.
Because it's death, right?
You'll be gone by
Yeah.
then.
It depends a lot on your dependents,
Right.
whether you have dependents
Sure.
and all that. If you do and you need that, then the other option that you can consider is besides that, if you're an NS man or NSF, the SAF group insurance or the MINDEF MHA group insurance, very good value, and it's portable. That's the most important thing. It's portable. So
Right.
unlike a lot of group insurance, this not this
What
one's
do you
actually
mean by
portable.
portable?
Portable means you, in this case, you don't have to be a MINDEF employee or an NSF or
Right.
an NS man in order to continue with it.
Right.
Now, my first career was with MINDEF as a civilian officer.
right.
So I actually hold that plan still to today.
Wow.
Yeah. So
even if you had not been a MINDEF employee for a long time after
that's right. You just need to continue.
Right.
And so that applies to like half the population because
Yeah.
everyone's an NSF, right?
Exactly,
So then
yeah.
you just continue as an NS man
Right.
and pay that part. Because during your NSF days, MINDEF pays for that portion, or home team pays for that portion. This is one of those tricks because nobody will sell you because there's no commission.
Yeah. I need to check with my husband about his.
Yes, and then he can cover you.
Yeah,
He can
exactly.
cover you, right?
Yeah.
So that's a low cost way. So DPS, MINDEF MHA group insurance.
Yes.
But if not, then there's a direct purchase insurance. Direct
Yes.
purchase insurance, you don't have commissions and all
Yep.
that. You can even go online and all that. Now, the recommendation is 9 times your income.
Okay.
Or you can do a better, what will your family need and all that kind of thing. And it actually can be very cost effective.
Yeah.
Right? So that's one way. So the first thing about income protection is really death, right? And then the second thing is critical illness.
Yes.
Now, the critical illness is basically cancer, heart attack, that kind of thing. And the basic critical illness is to cover you in the late stage.
Yes.
Right. And so people think that, I need this to cover for my expenses. Actually, no. For chemotherapy, dialysis, all these outpatient stuff is actually covered by your shield plan.
Right.
So what is this for? This is in case you cannot work. So that could have been what your financial planner was saying.
Yes,
Let's say you have a
she did.
critical
Yes,
illness.
that's right.
That's right.
Yeah.
But the thing is that nowadays with screening and all that, we detect early critical illness quite a lot.
That's right.
And most of these plans do not cover early critical illness.
Yeah.
But if you buy early critical illness, it's very expensive. So the thing is that you have to balance, right? So we usually say go at least for the late stage one, because that's when you really can't work. A lot of people during the early stages of cancers and all that, they can still work.
Yes,
in fact, they just
that's
take MC
true.
and go, and then they go back. So what you need to cover your hospital bill.
Yes.
Then you need to be able to get back and do that, and then do your chemo and all that, right? So what you can do is, because most early stuff is actually cancer. Most of early stuff
it's
is
mostly cancer,
Yeah.
correct, yeah.
So you can get very cheap cancer plans, right, that cover you. So that's that. So that's the second type. So the critical illness recommendation, according to MAS Basic Financial Planning Guide, is about 4 times your income, right, for your annual income. That is really actually for recuperation. Because why 4 times? Because when you get a late stage critical illness, it tends to be that either you survive beyond 4 years or you don't. So that's the recommendation.
That's right.
So this two. The third one is what you call occupational disability.
Yes.
So sometimes you get something. It could be an early critical illness, or it could be, let's say, a presenter, the loss of your voice and all that. Yeah. And the cancer, the critical illness insurance is not going to pay out.
Yeah.
It's not going to pay out. But you might also suffer in some cases like depression and all that. These are all good to have.
Yep.
But add them up.
Yep.
Right. Add them all up. MAS Basic Financial Planning Guide says all your insurance should not exceed 15% of your take-home pay. Okay. So I would say that even 10% sounds a bit much, because 15% here, then you need to save, right?
Yeah.
Isn't it bad? I'd rather you have as much in savings as well.
Right.
Then you need to eat, right? So 50% do that, insurance, then what? And then accumulation for the future. And remember that you don't have CPF, so it's not out the 100%, you get another 17%.
Exactly.
There, right?
Before you know it, all of it's used up and allocated already.
That's right. Yeah. So I think insurance really pay as little as you can.
Okay.
Maximize your coverage. Use term insurance. Use nice hacks like SAF Group Insurance. Use direct purchase insurance, and then all the other fear and uncertainty, all that might be used on you. You just have to have that enough knowledge and literacy to say, look, I have to focus on my financial plan must be based on my being able to earn, being able to thrive, not based on me dying.
Yeah. And that's exactly, the literacy is exactly why we are doing this episode. So Chuin, Ting, thank you very, very much for walking us through all of that. Very comprehensive indeed. And you know what? I wish I had this advice when I was freelancing all those years ago. But you know what? It is still beneficial even if you are a salary employee, because you never know what's going to happen. Now, before we let you go, there's a segment here on the Money Talks podcast. It's called Questions from a Hat, and that's exactly what it is. I'll just need you to pick one, hand it to me, and I'll ask you the question. All right?
Yeah.
Okay. And your question, Chuin Ting, is... what do you spend the most money on?
Okay, let's put aside kind of mortgage and all that, because I think that's probably one of the biggest.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think I spend the most money on my children.
Oh.
Yeah, children stuff and all that. But even I have to look at it and sometimes say, actually, what they want most from you is probably your time.
Yeah, and your attention, right?
That's right.
The bond with you.
That's right. We don't always have to go for that expensive restaurant and all that. Yeah. So it's a good reminder to myself to think about what really matters.
That's what's priceless, isn't it? That time and that energy and that love with the kids. It's priceless. We can't put a dollar sign on that. Lovely answer, Chuin Ting. Once again, thank you so much for being on the Money Talks podcast.
Thank you for having me. Yeah.
And listener, I hope this episode assures you that it actually is possible for you to achieve good financial habits and health while freelancing. There are ways for you to survive and also thrive as a freelancer. If you have any thoughts or questions about this episode, please send us a message. We'd love to hear from you. This podcast is available on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, as well as YouTube Music. Don't forget to rate us if you are enjoying this podcast. My thanks to the team, Joanne Chan, Tiffany Ang, Crispina Robert, Junaini Johari, and Sai Ye Wind. I'm Andrea Heng. Thank you for listening to the Money Talks podcast.